I briefly met PJ several years ago at one of our Texas sales. Because it's sale day, I was having trouble to just sit down and listen to him, but I could tell he knew a lot about like the Mashona breed and the African breeds and heat tolerance and those sort of things, and that's about all I can remember. And then I was asked to go to South Africa in January to speak to a group of people. I think there's about 500 people there. And I knew that PJ had been asked to go to the same event and participate. So I kind of Googled him and I found out that he's a world-renowned cattle judge. And I thought, what are we going to here? I says, but when you Google somebody like PJ, you're going to find lots of interviews, lots of presentations. I hear him talk. I've heard him talk after he judges a show ring class. Why he did this, why he did that, and I thought, this guy isn't normal. He's not.
Thank you. It's not normal.
He's not normal. And I heard him, I don't know, I think I heard him in one of his interviews or one of his talks. He says, fertility is very heritable. And right then I said, okay, this guy is on track. I'm the only one that's ever said that I know of, unless somebody was copying me. And so I got started getting excited, and the time I spent with him, we couldn't sit side by side on that 16-hour, 20-hour airplane flight. I don't know how long it was. But, the times in the airports, the times at the meeting over there, I just got more and more impressed. He knows what's structurally correct and incorrect. And, in my emails, I've been hammering on these level hips. That's not good. Sway backs, not good. The high tail heads, the lack of being wedge shaped. Mature cows and bulls should be wedge shaped. And this guy, he knows all that and then some. So I'm glad I could talk him into coming to talk to our bull sales. We had good meetings in Texas, good meetings in Missouri. He likes a little bit of participation, but if you start over participating, I'll probably shut it off. But he likes, I think he would prefer sitting down and being asked questions or challenged or pushed more than just giving his presentation. So don't be afraid to do that. I've done it, and he's let me get away with it. To my knowledge, last I heard, he has judged 108 different breeds of cattle in 51 different countries. I didn't know there were that many countries or breeds. But he's always gone somewhere. I'll send him a WhatsApp, and he'll be in Australia, New Zealand, South America. He could be anywhere. At our Missouri, at our Texas sale, my IT guy Ryan Ash and his son Skyler and I were visiting with PJ after his presentation, and I think Ryan says, how many kids do you have, or something like that, and PJ says, I've got 2 sets of twins, age 6 and 7. And then he went on to say, when you're gone as long as I am, as often as I am, you got to be really efficient when you're home. He can be a little humorous. So with that, I'm going to let him have his mic. Let me on the other side there.
Kit, thank you. Of all the introductions I've ever received, that's not only the most recent, but the most suspicious as well. I'm still pinching myself that I'm speaking to buyers at a Kit Pharaoh event, and it's the third one in 3 weeks, and I still can't get used to why I'm here. Maybe it's because Kit isn't normal either. Maybe that's what we share in common, is a lack of normality. Colorado is special for me. In January 2007, this was the first place I landed when I came to the US for the first time. I landed at the Denver airport, and I'd forgotten to book a room. So I asked the very fine gentleman at the information desk where he suggests I stay, and I didn't realize Denver was that far from the airport. So he said he had a friend, and the friend had a hotel or some kind of lodging called the Melbourne Inn, downtown Denver, and he said he thinks that's a good place for me to stay. So organized a taxi, he called his friend, and his friend had space for me. So we get there, and his friend takes me up to my room and opens the gate and then the door, and I went in, and there was a bed and nothing else. And then I put my suitcases down, and he took me down the hallway to the bathrooms. It was a communal bathroom setup. And I thought, well, this is America, so happy to be here. And I went to bed and very excited about what was about to happen the next day. And that next day, I went to the guy downstairs and asked him where the breakfast room was, and he said, well, we've got a microwave, but you kind of have to do your own thing. And told me how to get to the stock show, because I was here for the National Western Stock Show. And he said, and I said, what's the best way, like a taxi? You know, that was before Uber. And he said, no, for you. He said, just walk these 4 blocks in the snow, minus 20, or like temperatures that were completely foreign to me. And when you get there, there's a bus that takes you like within spitting distance of where you want to go. So I did that for $2, got there, and I was still excited because this is America, you know. And I walked into the stockyards and into those yards at the stock show with all those pens of cattle and bulls and those carloads and, you know, the snow coming down. And I remember this was before our phones could email, or there was no internet on my phone. Went into international room there, had a computer, and I emailed home, and I told my parents that I found my place in the world. After the night I'd had and my bus trip and seeing the stockyards, I mean, that was good enough for me. I was sold. It was only days later that I was told that I was actually staying in a shelter, and that $29 a night's not a normal price to pay for a hotel. But yeah, so Denver's always been special to me, and I love coming back to Colorado and spending time with you guys. Yeah, I mean, you guys, I don't know why you all showed up to listen to a show judge. I don't know, you think I might have some new reasons that are different to what you've heard in the past or something. But I've got a story to tell you about show judging, and then we'll actually get down to business. How about that? So, the story goes, this is like a combination of history and mythology. It's like partly truth and partly fiction. There was this guy at the Denver Stock Show, and he was working one of his steers with a blower, and he was rinsing the steer, and there was one of those electric storms that you guys can get up here. And there was water on the ground, and lightning struck and electrocuted the young kid and the steer. A tragedy, absolute tragedy. So he gets to the pearly gates, and he sees St. Peter. And St. Peter welcomes him in and says, "This is your new home, and have a great time." And he walks through the gates, and it's just green grass and big trees and butterflies, and the birds are singing, and the cows are fat. They're like frame 4s. Frame 4, full-bodied, fat cows, shiny coats, and it's heavenly. It's like heaven. So he says to St. Peter, "Do you have cow shows here?" And St. Peter says, "No, this is heaven. We don't compete. We celebrate together." So he says, "Well, I don't know if I can stay here if there are no cow shows." So St. Peter says, "Well, I can't help you. I'm sorry. There's just no mechanism to create cow shows in heaven, because it would take in everything that goes with a cow show. And that's not very heavenly." So he says, "Well, okay." Well, then St. Peter says, "Actually, there is an idea. I can take you down the road." So they turn right out of the pearly gates, down the road, and they come to the other place, and and the devil's waiting for his next refugee. And the young guy goes in there, and the devil welcomes him. St. Peter turns and leaves as quick as he can. And the devil says to him, welcome to hell, but this place is not good, guys. Like, let me tell you. It's hot and humid, and it's just dust and wire and tortoises, and the cows look like bicycles with blankets on them. They've got no shape. They're just droopy, and there's flies and ticks. It's just awful and nothing to eat. And he says to the devil, he says, do you guys have cow shows here? And the devil says, no, you can't. These are not show cattle. They're not in show condition. So he says, well, this is tough. Now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I don't know what to do now. But the devil, he's smart. He's charming in a serpentine kind of way. And he says to the guy, I've got an idea. Why don't we halter break these cows, and we go and show them against those cows in heaven? We'll have like a interstate cow show. They're not states, but you know what I mean. They're different states of mind. So the guy says, you can't take these cows to show against those cows in heaven. I've just seen those frame 4 fat, shiny cows, and they're perfect, every single one of them. I mean, that'll be laughable. The devil says to him, yes, but you've forgotten one key detail. He said, we've got all the judges, he says. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the story I heard. Anyway, guys, just some background. This is the group of companies I work with, mainly with Transover Genetics, big embryo company. I do a lot of their international business management and development. The reason I've got this slide up here is because the views you're about to hear are my own views, not the views of Eurus, okay? So if any Eurus corporate guys are here, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone but myself. So I want to start off by just laying the foundation of why I think it's important to do what we do. And I grew up as a questionable student, and I'm still a questionable student. I ask a lot of questions, and I don't get very good grades, and that's always been the case for me. And one thing we were told that really confused me all through school is that we need to appreciate the teachers. Are there any teachers here tonight? Just, okay, you can block your ears. Okay, it's not going to be good. So it says we must appreciate the teachers, because the teachers are the real heroes. You know, they work so hard, and they put up with all of you, and, you know, they're molding these pliable minds. And I never could buy into that, because my history teacher, Mr. Percy Callahan, would be up on the chalkboard writing in chalk, and he just didn't cut a very imposing and very heroic figure while he was doing that. I couldn't see how these teachers are the real heroes. But what I've come to find as I travel around the world everywhere is that farmers and ranchers are the real heroes. And a lot of this is self-evident and obvious. For example, the fact that 1 to 2% of us feed 100% of the population. That's remarkable. I mean, that's superhero status. Now, I don't know which one of these superheroes you guys want to pick, but there's a smorgasbord to go after there. The biggest superpower farmers and ranchers have, in my opinion, is that they decentralize power. So you take the United States is a great example of this. There are thousands of flourishing small towns across the country, and they've got wealth and influence, and they've got an ability to maintain themselves and self-preserve and flourish. And most of those small towns, if not all of them, outside of mining, are propped up by agriculture. What that does is it spreads that power, influence, and wealth across the country, so it's not just held in one big urban center. And if you see migration patterns around the world, people move out of centralized countries where all the wealth's in one big city and there's no wealth, influence, or power in the rest of the country, and they move to decentralized countries. So whenever you think of the US as decentralized in terms of power, farmers and ranchers are the ones to thank for that. And that's why I think it's so pivotal that we preserve that family farm, and why my bias leans strongly into the cow-calf producer instead of sharing that bias with the other links in the value chain. And then they're very good for national security. You take large swaths of land across a country like the US, are only occupied because of livestock farming or ranching. There's no reason to put roads in, or rail, or telephone lines, or electricity, or cell phone service. There's no reason for that other than there being farmers and ranchers. So without that, you could be invaded and not know about it. And I think this is my argument for farmers being the real heroes. And I know there must be good teachers out there. So thank you for your work as well. So if we take this one step further, this logic, this is what I call the human flourishing value chain. And so I believe we have to preserve our way of life of producing livestock for human consumption as a protein. And I've just explained why that's so important. But we have to persevere to do that. There isn't another industry that perseveres like farmers and ranchers through floods and droughts and fires and questionable economic downturns, questionable political decisions, bad economic downturns as farmers. So it takes a lot of perseverance. Our industry is right in pole position when it comes to having to handle all of that. And then we need productive animals, and that's what we're going to get into here in a few minutes, is what that is. What does it take for an animal to be productive? Because those productive animals create profitable farms and ranches and businesses. And profitable farms, ranches, and businesses allow for flourishing, prosperous communities. And that completes that human flourishing value chain. So again, my premise is I think humans need to flourish as much as possible, because it's good for everything. It's good for humanity, it's good for our species, it's good for the environment. It's just good for everything when humans flourish as much as they can. Again, our industry is vital in this, because if there are 235 countries around the world and territories that are inhabited, almost every single one of them has cattle. Every single one of them has cattle or drinks milk or eats beef. So this is a truly global industry. I mean, remarkable. There are not many industries that can claim that. I've listed the countries that have the most cattle, India, Brazil, China, US, and Ethiopia. But the interesting part here, speaking of centralization, is that 60% of the world's cattle are in those 5 countries. So it is quite centralized in terms of cow numbers. So Forbes magazine, I'm always interested in this list that they publish once a year, and it's the happiest country list. They list all those countries and territories based on a happiness index, and it's built on about close to, I think, 200 data points, just different reasons that makes people flourish and brings happiness, like everything from crime to education to everything, okay, all put into one good index. And those are the 10 happiest countries this year, according to that index. But what's interesting, and this is where it relates to agriculture, what's interesting about those 10 countries is they all share 3 traits. And the first trait is they're free market economies. All 10 of those countries are free market economies. So the citizens of the country decide what the value of a good or a service is. And I think that's so important in our agricultural associations, cattlemen's associations, breed associations, breeder groups, is to let the breeders decide what they think is valuable. So allow them to be scientists, and their properties, their ranches or farms, to be laboratories so that they can prove or disprove genetics or systems, management systems, so that everyone benefits from the ones that work. I think there's really a lot of value in that. The second thing those 10 countries do is they've unleashed energy. So whether that energy is fossil fuels or renewables, or whether it's hydro or nuclear, whatever energy it is, they've unleashed it. They haven't held it back. So it's allowed that energy to flow and the economy to grow. Now, I think from a human standpoint, that's very, very important too. If there's energy in your association or in your group or in your family, don't bridle it. Don't put a leash on that energy. Like, let it go. Yeah, guide it, channel it, but don't hold it back, because eventually you're losing out on human resources and human capital and happiness. The third thing is all 10 of those countries have liberated women. And this was fascinating to me when I realized that, because there are a lot of wealthy countries that are very peaceful that aren't on that list, but they haven't liberated women. And I think why this is so important, beside the fact that it's the moral and right thing to do, is when you hold women back, you're tying the hands of 50% of your population. So your workforce, your economic energy units are pulled back by 50%, and that 50% is raising 100% of the next generation. So these are just, like I say, all of this are just observations that I've had as I go around the world. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just what I've observed, and that's why, like Kit says, every now and then Kit will say something to me and then this presentation changes. Like, I think it's important to us as producers and as thinkers that we're not obliged to be who we were 5 minutes ago. We are allowed to change, and we're allowed to grow, and our opinions can change. And I think that freedom is important, because otherwise you get bogged down in dogma that isn't really going anywhere. And that is what I appreciate about this group. And I'm saying this not because Kit's carrying a pistol on his hip and behind me, but you've got a very, very unique, abnormal leader here, because he is thoughtful. He thinks a lot. I mean, if you read his weekly newsletters, it's remarkable how much thought goes into that, and how, you know, when convention sleeps, that's when Kit wakes up, you know. And he's honest. Like, to me too, he's dead honest. Like, if he thinks like what I'm saying doesn't make sense, he tells me, and I really appreciate that. And he is intelligent, but yeah, just don't tell him that. Okay. So we're grateful. Let's give Kit a big round of applause, guys. What he's put together there is remarkable. We're really fortunate to have this kind of thought leadership. This next slide shows a city-state. This would be like during the Roman era or Phoenician era. And basically what it's showing is a walled city. There's an emperor or king in the middle of the city, and they've got gates all around the city. Now, what they would do with these gates is they'd have gatekeepers at each gate, and the gatekeeper would be responsible for monitoring commerce moving in and out of the city, people moving in and out of the city, goods and services moving in and out, trouble moving in or out. And every 2 weeks, all these gatekeepers get together with the emperor or the king and explains to them what his kingdom or his city-state looks like from a 360-degree angle. Now, as farmers and ranchers, we're in a very similar hypothetical position. Farmers and ranchers also live in the middle of their city-state. There's a big fence around it. It's a walled city-state. They often do behave like emperors or king, not you guys, but other ones. They do behave like emperors and kings. They might listen to their spouse and their banker, but that's about it. That's all they'll listen to. So my encouragement here is to put gatekeepers at your gates. And I've identified 8. This is not exact science. Again, this is just me identifying 8 gates that I think complete a farming or ranching program when it comes to livestock. And they're all equally important when you consider that if there's a missing gatekeeper at one of those gates, you know, trouble could come into your business, or you could lose money by going through that gate and out of that gate. So it's very important to have gatekeepers at all. What are gatekeepers? Gatekeepers is either you paying attention to that discipline or hiring specialists that you meet with or consultants to make sure that those gates are covered. So those 8 gates in a cattle operation or livestock operation would be genetics, herd management, nutrition, animal health, marketing, record keeping, and then forage management and human capital, human resources. When I was running the properties in South Africa before we moved here, or in Southern Africa, my managers had these 8 gates down And they just had to pay attention to all 8 of those things each month. And it's amazing how it just triggered something in them to just pay attention to something that they maybe wouldn't have thought of during that month. And it made them build their schedules a lot more accurately too. So as we get further, this moves more into genetics now and into livestock. And as we move into that, I think it's so important when we start making our breeding decisions, when we start evaluating where our herds are at from a genetic standpoint, that we're fully aware of the nuances and the context of what we're doing. So this picture I've got up is a guy called Dorian Garrick. He's from New Zealand, and he and I were in Kazakhstan speaking at the Kazakh Angus meetings. And this was fascinating. I think I was the only one in Kazakhstan at the time that understood what he was saying, but I'm so glad I was there, because this actually was, he was so eloquent in the way he put the study together that it stuck with me, and I still think about this whenever I'm working cattle with clients. So his study was that from 1980 to 2017, the average Angus steer in a feedlot in the United States of America made $144 more. That's taking into consideration feed costs, inflation, labor costs, all of that, okay? That's amazing, and they were using an index called dollar beef to do that. Now, that showed that this really did work. The dollar beef index did what it was set out to do. Now, during that same time, between 1980 to 2017, the average Angus cow in the US cost $136 more per year to run, okay? So if you're a cow-calf guy and you don't feed out your own steers, you are losing $136 so that someone else could make $144. Now, I wasn't a good math, I don't know what you teach, not math, do you? No, because I wasn't a good math teacher, but that doesn't sound like a very good deal at all. And I think that's where the question popped into my mind. There are all these indexes, and we'll go through them sometime today. There's dollar beef, dollar maternal, dollar profit, dollar ranch, dollar complete, dollar profit. I mean, there's so many indexes, but the question we need to ask ourselves is, who's getting that dollar? Because if we're not getting that dollar as cow-calf producers, why on earth would we pay attention to it? Because once you've been paid for your product and it gets to the farm gate, your job's done. Like you don't have to do more than that, and I'll get into why later. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Weston, you missed the only part of my speech that's different from the last 2 weeks, and now you have to listen to the same thing again. But anyway, okay, you have to rewind it when you get home. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think we need to pay attention to these genetic evaluation systems that have been created. In their best form, they are very helpful. And they're really fine running machines. I mean, it's a Rolls Royce. And so if you consider that everyone is measuring everything all the time, accurately, honestly, in large numbers, in the same environment, this thing really works. The problem is that's not happening all that much. And the bigger problem than that is we've got two groups of industries that are taking advantage of this Rolls Royce, and the one of them is the Rolls Royce is the genetic evaluations. No, like the genetic evaluations, how they create EPDs or EBVs or genomics or, yeah, sorry, thank you, that's a good point. So the Rolls Royce is genetic evaluations. The breed associations are one of the problems in that a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them haven't got a license to drive this Rolls Royce. So they publish trait leaders and they put graphs up, and if you're on the right of the graph, it's the right direction. If you're on the left, it's the wrong direction. This was supposed to be an objective tool, but it's become a subjective tool that's used for marketing, and that's where the big problem comes. But this was supposed to be as objective as seeing a white-tailed deer, in your front pasture. It's there, right? What the breed associations have done is told you whether it should be there or not, and how good it is, and whether you should shoot it or whether you should keep it. That was never their job to do. Their job was just to publish an objective number. Okay. The second issue, so they're not licensed drivers of this Rolls-Royce. The second problem is we've got, I remember in Denver when I first came here, they were all drinking at the yard bar and all over the place. There were peanut hulls all over the floors, and they were drinking red beer. Still don't know what a red beer is, but the problem with these marketing companies and sales and marketing companies is they've been drinking a lot of red beer when they drive this Rolls-Royce. They're not sober. Like if you're marketing top 1% for this and top 5% for that, and using all kinds of adjectives that don't belong in the livestock industry to market these things, that's a drunk driver. So I think what we need to do is, when looking at those numbers, take into consideration who's measuring it, what traits are being measured, whether this Rolls-Royce is being driven by a drunk driver or by an unlicensed driver, and make sure the fuel is right in the vehicle. The fuel is the phenotype's been put in. Junk in, junk out. Okay. Guys, does that make sense so far? Are there any questions or complaints or criticisms? Or no? Kit, anything? Good. This slide is another thing that we need to pay attention to, especially when we're evaluating where our genetics come from. So I've termed this mum's the word. Those pictures of me judging a Holstein show in Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, 2 years ago, and I was there doing the same thing 2 years before, and I was supposed to be there now, but there are no flights going there, so I couldn't get there. Wonderful place, by the way. We can chat about that tomorrow. Mum's the word. Okay, so all these genetic evaluations assume that 50% of that calf's potential, genetic potential, comes from the mother and 50% from the father. Okay, so that's right from a nuclear DNA standpoint. It is 50-50. But when you get into mitochondria and you realize that 100% of the mitochondrial DNA is coming from the dam, it's not 50-50 anymore. When you consider that the epigenetics that are happening in utero and the fetal programming that can take place, the genes that are being turned on and off, the genes that will express themselves, the ones that don't, are all happening in utero, then it's definitely not 50% anymore. When you consider those first couple of days that calf is born and the colostrum it's getting from its dam, and that colostrum determines whether that animal flourishes for the rest of its life or fails, it's not 50%. And then the education that calf receives as it's growing up next to its mother and learning how to be a cow, what to graze, what not to eat, pecking orders, when to lie down, when to go to water. That education is coming 100% from the dam. So depending on all those variables, I think we're probably more at like 65% of the dam, which is interesting. We need to pay attention to our cow families because the mitochondria runs through our cow families, but also the whole EPD system is going to have to change because it's assuming 50-50. So fertility, I believe, is highly heritable. It's the most important economic trait when evaluating the cattle themselves. So stocking rate is obviously the one that can change your profits and change your fortunes the quickest. Once you've got past that, fertility is so important, and there are different metrics of how much more important it is than growth and milk, but it doesn't matter. It's more important, and it is highly heritable when measured correctly. So academia, I think, is right with their textbooks because all those tests were done and all those trials were done on highly over-managed cow herds, okay? If you manage a cow herd responsibly, then you'll see how highly heritable fertility is. It can't be lowly heritable for a number of reasons. The first thing is it's a survival trait. The second thing is just through self-evidence. If you spent enough time with your cows, you will know how fertile certain cow families are. In the sheep and goat business, where this is more a South African reference, I heard there were sheep in America, and when I got here, I saw there were just mini alpacas. It's remarkable what the US has done to the ovine. It's an incredible change from what a sheep used to be. But anyway, in sheep and goat business, I'm actually just joking. Well, I'm not really joking, but I'm just trying to say that you've changed them. Okay. Now, in the sheep and goat business, we select rams that are from ewes that twin a lot, because we know that how heritable it is. Okay, that's slightly different because it's twins. But if you sit around a table, Thanksgiving table, and your niece or your cousin has just had twins and comes in there, and then you're chatting to her husband and like, hey, what side of the family did this come from? That's not a question if it's not heritable. It's only the question because inherently we know it's heritable. Okay, it's self-evident. But here's the point that I want you guys to think about. Okay, if you've got a cow herd of 300 cows, and it's made up of 100 Holstein cows, and 100 Belgian blue cows, and 100 PCC, Faro Cattle Company cows. Okay, they all run together in a rotational grazing system. You all know which the 100 most fertile cows are going to be year in and year out. Why? How do you know that? There's no data on that because no one's ever done that before. So how do you actually know that? You know it because it's self-evident. You know the Holsteins and the Belgian Blues will never be able to be as fertile. Self-evidence is something that gets so little respect and attention from academia, because it's not put on paper in the form of diagrams and arithmetic. But I went to Japan 2 years ago on a Wagyu trip, and while I was there, I noticed something remarkable, and I came back, and the self-evident statement that I made was that almost everyone in Japan has black hair. There's no data to that. You find me a graph showing that almost everyone in Japan has got black hair. And this is our observation, observing thousands of cattle over over decades, and seeing them in different places. There's value in self-evidence. I know scientists have a massive part to play in what we do, but we are also scientists. Like in the truest form of the word, we are observing and repeating and making sure that what we observe operates the same way in different scenarios. That's a scientific method. I mean, we absolutely are part of the scientific process. I'd like to add, a lot of us do select against infertility by culling cows. I'd like to encourage us to select for fertility by selecting for those fertility traits like ease of fleshing, hormonal balance, so masculine bulls, feminine females, easy fleshing, full-bodied cattle. All of that lends itself to fertility. The two most important traits that make up fertility are high inherent body condition, so easy fleshing cattle with hormonal balance. So feminine cows that are easy fleshing are fertile. 1 + 1 = 2. So we can select for it, and we do that by identifying the females that come into estrus early, the bulls that have live sperm at an early age, and then observing those phenotypes that lend themselves in that direction. We're going to run through a few logical fallacies, and I think these are important because we've got a product and we've got a product to sell, and it's a very busy, noisy marketplace, and there's a lot of nonsense spewed out there. And I think it's important that if we're going to survive and thrive in polite society, that we adhere by the rules of conversation. So the first number one logical fallacy I'll discuss with you is called the ad hominem, or playing the man fallacy. So this is like when a guy from South Africa comes and you go, and he's talking to you and about how highly heritable fertility is, and then you say, wait, wasn't that guy caught smuggling semen across the border or something? So it may or may not be true, but it's got nothing to do with the point that's been made. Ideas need to stand and live on their own. Whatever that guy did is a totally different topic altogether. So let's stop playing the man and start playing the ball. I asked this question in Texas and Missouri. Are there any Swedish speakers in the room? Anyone speak Swedish here? No one. At Kansas State, they didn't teach Swedish. That's amazing. Did you hear that? It's not actually funny, but there was this little kid that went, checked himself into childcare, and he said, please take care of me because my mother's beating me and my father's beating me and I don't know what to do. And they said, go to K-State because they don't beat anyone. Anyway, so the Swedes have a word called lagom, okay? And lagom is a philosophy that these Scandinavians live by. And basically what it means is it's not too much or not too little, it's just the right amount. So when you see their homes, they're just the right size home, the amount of food on their plate is just the right size, the car they drive matches what they do, so they aim for optimum instead of maximum. I think with cattle and really with most things in life, if we can train ourselves to aim for optimum instead of maximum, not only is that where you find profit, it's where you find happiness as well. And I've really learned a lot by observing this culture in Scandinavia. And if you saw on that top 10 list, if you read through it, all 5 Scandinavian countries are on that top 5 list, which is, I mean, on the top 10 list, which is remarkable. So when we look at cows, which are our factory, it's our profit center, I think it's important that we break the traits of a cow up into 2 different traits. At the top, we've got what I call profit traits, okay? So the profit traits are adaptability, that's nutritional and environmental adaptability. Then you've got functional efficiency, fertility, and longevity. Those are the traits that keep you in business. At the bottom, it's what I call our turnover traits. So that's growth, milk, muscle, marbling, weight. That's what you get paid for on the day. So that's your turnover trait. But that's not what necessarily keeps you in business. And it's so important that we first take care of those fundamental traits before we start breeding for traits that are really just turnover traits. They're secondary. It's like a game of Monopoly. You don't start the game by buying a house on some expensive street around the corner on the block. You start at begin. Okay, Pennsylvania Avenue is not your first move when you play Monopoly. And I think often in cattle breeding, we're shooting for the stars in growth or milk or marbling, and that's not where you make a profit out of cattle. Here's another logical fallacy. It's called the red herring fallacy, or dragging a dead fish across the path of hunting dogs that are on a scent. So I'm also disappointed there are no Hereford bulls here. But Herefords, the breed that made grass famous. I mean, I think we must work on this white-faced side of this program. But imagine if I'm saying that it's so important for Hereford cattle to have pigment, and because it's so, it's good at reflecting ultraviolet and infrared rays, and we'll get into this later, it's good for photosensitivity issues and stuff like that. And then someone says, well, if you put too much red on a Hereford's face, they start looking like a Simmental. again, a valid point, but all they're doing is dragging a dead fish across the path of hunting dogs, so they follow that scent instead of the point I'm trying to make is pigment is important, not how much pigment or whether it'll look like a Simmental or not. Okay, so as we evaluate structure and phenotype, now I really do believe in structural soundness and integrity, and there are a lot of people within, I'd say, this mindset that we have of, whether it's holistic or regenerative or cell grazing or mob grazing or rotational grazing or ultra high intensity grazing, whatever it is, there are a lot of people that say, okay, when you talk structure, you're going into too many details, okay? But I really believe that structural integrity is vital in livestock. They also use the idiom, or it's a proverb, I guess, from Brazil. I don't know, Brazil had proverbs, but this one came from Brazil, from a sugarcane farmer. And basically he was saying, if you want to go a long way, you've got to carry a light bag or light baggage. If you're not structurally sound, you're not going anywhere. Never mind a long way or not. So let's break down what that means. So we need cattle to be able to eat and walk and reproduce. So they need good muzzles and jaws. They need a lot of rumen function and internal dimension. They need good feet and legs with some symmetry in those toes. They need bone that's appropriate, not too much bone, because bone length and bone width is driven by growth hormones. When you put too much of that in, you're holding back the sex hormones, so you're holding back fertility. Sex hormones kick in when the long bones stop growing, when they ossify. And then you need athleticism in these cattle with good shoulder structure, good hip structure, good hind leg structure. And we focus a lot on feet, as we should, but a lot of that comes from the upper skeleton. So it's the shape of the shoulder, shape of the hip, shape of the hind leg. Because remember, when a calf is born, you guys have all had calves, otherwise you wouldn't be here. No calves are born with toes that are curling in or flat heels or feet that have grown out. They're all born with pretty good symmetrical feet. So the issue comes when the pressure comes from on high, from the angle of the shoulder might not be right, or the knees too far forward, the hips too flat, and all that pressure on those joints, and there's not enough flexibility in the joints, changes the shape of the feet. These things are incredibly important when we extensively managing them as we do. Shoulder angles also extremely important for calving ease. If you've got a bull that's got a really good angle on his shoulder, his offspring who inherit that trait have got more flexibility in getting their feet forward and their head correctly presented as they're coming through the birth canal. When they're too straight in that shoulder or too bold in that shoulder, that's where they get jammed up. So shoulder angle is incredibly important, not just for athleticism and longevity, flexibility, but for calving ease as well. Then, like I said, we focus on those four most important economic traits: adaptability, functional efficiency, longevity, and fertility. And once that foundation's been laid, then we select for the optimum amount of muscle, milk, marbling, growth, weight, etc. And then quality cattle do come in all different shapes, sizes, and colors. So it's easy to make them big or little. It's easy to make them black or red or white-faced. It's easy to make them horned or polled. The art of breeding lies in making good cattle. And then you as breeders, buyers, cattle enthusiasts, you've really got to decide whether that good one fits your objectives. So what you want to do with your cattle, where you want to take your program, your resources, how much land you have, what kind of land you have, how much money you're prepared to put into this, or you've got to put into it, and then your environment. So getting into some of the phenotype in these cattle, I didn't get a chance to change these bulls' heads yet. I thought that'd be more appropriate for the fall season, So, and I was just never home this week. But the head of an animal is so important. Guys, when an animal pops its head around the corner, by the time you get to the bridge of its nose, you should know, okay, this is a bull, or it's a steer, or it's a heifer, or cow. When the whole head is through into the neck, you need to know whether this is actually worth having a look at or not. Because there really has, the same way there's never been a good cow with a bad udder, there's never been a good bull with a bad head, okay? And you can tell so much from a bull by its head. The strength of its jaw will give you skeletal strength all the way through. The width of the muzzle will tell you how wide that animal is through its body. You know, the width of the muzzle is the same as the width between the pin bones. The length of the skull will tell you what the animal's maturity pattern is. A very long skull is late and a leaner phenotype, a late maturing leaner phenotype. The shorter the skull, the earlier maturing, the easier fleshing that animal's going to be. The width between the eyes will tell you, again, a lot about the skeletal width. That width between the eyes is so important for traits like tenderness in the carcass, the position of that bull's eyes and the shape of his eyes, and the way it's positioned in the skull with some hooding or an eyebrow will show you the temperament of the animal. So the higher and smaller the eye, the wilder those cattle get. You know, a well-hooded eye that's correctly positioned further down the head will show you a more gentle disposition. The curliness of the hair on the crest and the coarseness of that head and the grunt in his head is going to show you that the testosterone's flowing. And then if you want to get into really finer details, like the point of the pole will show you more marbling, the narrowness of the ridge on a horned animal will show you more marbling. There's such a story to tell in these animals' heads. And as you can see, the bull on the left is the one I've been trying to describe. The bull on the right, he's very different, isn't he? Longer skull, high, small eyes, small muzzle, small jaw, leaner, later maturing, just hasn't got that testosterone in him at all that the bull on the left has got. And why is that important? Because fertility is highly heritable and an extremely important selection trait. Yes, sir?
Could you point out on those, you were talking a minute ago about the slope of the shoulders?
Yeah.
Could you point out on those the desired slope on the shoulder?
Yeah, so it's about a 45 degree from the top. Can you see the arrow or not? Okay, so from the top of the shoulder to the point of the shoulder on the scapula, you want about a 45 degree angle. So what that does is it allows the animal to pick its head up. You know, bulls that can't pick their heads up are too straight in their shoulders. And the angle of the shoulder, if you take that angle all the way down to the ground, that's where that bull's next step is going to land when it's walking. So a bull with a very straight shoulder is going to shuffle. The bull with some angle in his shoulder is going to stride out and cover ground. Then from the shoulder to the knee, you want angle again. You want that bull to be back at the knee because he needs that flexibility in his knee, you know, for athleticism. So those angles are so important. I'm sorry I don't have a clicker to show you or a light, but we can look through them tomorrow. They'll be good-shouldered bulls, these. They weren't selected by a rookie, I'll tell you that. Another fallacy that we run into a lot is the straw man fallacy, and this is misrepresenting the intention or facts of an argument in order to build a counter-argument. So I remember I posted something and it got some attention about how marketing bulls, well, breeding bulls that are specifically heifer bulls. So the guys can't use your cows on their heifers, they're specifically heifer bulls, is a bit of a human construct, and it's an unnecessary and dangerous construct, because what happens down the line is you change the pelvic shapes and pelvic sizes of these cattle, and you know, it creates other birth issues down the line where you can't breed even the cows to a normal bull. Angus went through this, Ponsmara in South Africa went through this. Anyway, so that was my point. And a genius in Minnesota said, well, good luck breeding your heifers to terminal sires. Like, that's not even vaguely on the same planet of what we were discussing. But when you build a straw man argument like that, it's not intellectually honest. You know, I think you win people over when you stick to the facts of the conversation. When you start throwing straw man arguments out like that, it becomes like a playground at recess. So I think it's, again, a lot of people think I'm wasting my time with these logical fallacies, but I really am trying to win people over to more profitable cattle in a cow-calf operation. Okay, so adaptability, for me, is the gateway trait to fertility and longevity through functional efficiency. Okay, so adaptability to nutrition and environment is the gateway to fertility and longevity through functional efficiency. So if you want fertility and longevity, you need adaptability. Okay, so like that Highland cow in the Highlands of West Scotland, perfectly adapted to the wind and the rain and the cold that they get up there all year round. She's also extremely easy fleshing, so she can graze up on the hills on the bracken and just be fine. But if you put her in Brazil, where these Nelore cows and calves are, she would probably last 20 to 30 days before she dies, just because of the humidity, the ticks, yes, sir?
I happen to be one of those crazy SOBs that runs Highland crosses, and those things will eat anything in a desert environment like we've got in southern Colorado.
Yeah.
So they're very adaptable.
So you're making my point, right?
Yes?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about heat and humidity. We don't have that.
Oh, no, look,
Colorado, but
no, I'm with you.
Highland cross,
Yeah.
she'll eat scrub oak, she'll eat...
Yeah, she eats bracken in Scotland. That's not even edible. Yeah.
Put flesh on.
But in the tropics of Brazil, where it's hot and humid, and there's ticks, and there's insects, and they're standing in about that much water all year, she's got about 20 to 30 days to live. So I'm just saying, like, horses for courses. I agree with you. I'm a big fan of them. And that's why I don't want to send her to Brazil, because she'll die. You know, I like the Highland cows. These Nelore cows are so well adapted in Brazil to the predators and to the ticks and the internal parasites and the heat and the humidity. But if you move them to southern Colorado in the winter, they would survive, but they'll eat 4 times more than your Highland cow to survive, because the energy requirements will be so high. So the point I'm making is that all the good traits in those two breeds can only express themselves if they're adapted to the environment and to the nutrition available. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm not downing the Highland. Like, I like her. That's why I don't want to send her to Brazil. So the efficiency, you know, any business needs to run on efficiency, and there are a lot of different measurements for efficiency, and a lot are measurable, but they're not necessarily all meaningful in our context. I'll give you 2 quick examples here. The first one is, this is feed efficiency in those feed bunks, where they measure how many pounds of grain it will take to put on a pound of beef. They also measure average daily gain and then residual feed intake. Awesome if you run a feedlot. Not great if you're on a cow-calf operation on a forage system. The bulls that perform best in confinement, their daughters will be, they'll have the highest energy requirements, and they'll be the least efficient and productive on a forage-based system. Those 2 traits are very antagonistic. Residual feed intake, I don't know if that's a trait that any of you have paid any attention to, or whether it's even worth mentioning. Is it? Not really. Okay, that's fine with me. Cow-calf efficiency, we'll get into some of this later, but just the percentage of a mother's weight that she weans in her calf at weaning, that efficiency. And then functional efficiency, I've got a slide on that that we'll touch on. And then just getting into the physiology and endocrinology that makes up balanced cattle. We'll get into that as well. Another logical fallacy. So false equivalence, okay? So comparing apples and oranges. So this would be like saying that black, shiny, slick-coated cattle are way more heat tolerant than red, fuzzy-hided cattle, okay? But those aren't apples and apples. If you're going to have a fair conversation that you compare black shiny cattle with red shiny cattle. Yeah, does that make sense? So to avoid the false equivalences. Guys, longevity is so important. It's so expensive to replace these females and to raise replacement females. So the longer that cow can be productive in your herd, the better. Reward those cows that last a long time and are productive for a long time by using their sons and keeping their daughters in the herds. This is an invaluable trait. Angus just came up with a new EPD called functional longevity, which they're measuring on 6-year-old cows because they couldn't find enough contemporary groups of cows older than 6 in the business breed, which is remarkable when you consider how young a 6-year-old cow actually is. So this is how far some of the industry has strayed, or I suppose unfortunately the majority of the industry has strayed. When selecting for maximum growth, maximum milk, maximum marbling, their eye's not on the ball, and fertility and longevity suffer first. So we've got to breed and reward longevity. A lot of popular performance herds around the world, you'll go into that herd and you can't really find the bull between the females. They're very much the same size and the same shape. A lot of sexual monomorphism taking place. And this is again because they're selecting by propagating the growth hormones and not the sex hormones. So when you select for maximum growth, maximum muscle, maximum marbling, even maximum milk, if you think of Holsteins, your bulls get a little more feminine, like this bull on the right, and your females actually take on a more masculine appearance. She's got a bit of crest to her, she hasn't got that softness and easy fleshing ability to her. So that happens when you select primarily for traits that are driven by the growth hormones. When you select for traits that are driven by the sex hormones, you get what those cattle at the bottom are. You get bulls and females that don't look anything alike. You can tell the bull from a mile away is bigger, is thicker, is got more punch to him than the female. And this is the normal state. This is a mammalian phenomenon. This is what mammals are like when left alone in nature. I really like, and I think Kit's been using this analogy, I don't know, 20, how many years about the lady sitting on the couch? Forever. I remember reading this long before I even was too familiar with what Farah Cattle Company was about. I was just reading something that Kit had written. And basically what he was saying was that when 3 men sit on a couch or in the front of a truck, their shoulders are touching. When 3 ladies are sitting down, their hips are touching. It's just a mammalian phenomenon, and we need to pay attention. The cattle need to be the same way as that, because what you're going to get from cattle that are shaped like those top cattle is a huge drop in both fertility and longevity. And this there actually are receipts and data for. False appeal to authority, logical fallacy number 5. This is when you throw someone's name in front of a quote and then try and make that add weight to it. So, like if Dr. Doolittle, PhD, says that fertility is lowly heritable, it doesn't matter who said it. The idea has to be measured itself. And I think too often we put someone's name in front of a statement and think, yeah, that's enough, I can walk away, I've won. But we all remember what happened during COVID. I mean, with Dr. Fauci, trust the science, that didn't end up too well for any of us. So I'm going to bang on a little more now about optimum and looking for optimum and finding optimum. And optimum is always going to be between extremes, okay? And you're going to need to find that for your objectives and your resources and your environment. So like that Chianina bull on the left and that miniature Galloway on the right, your growth optimum isn't going to be on those extremes. It's going to be somewhere in between those two, okay? Muscle's the same. That Belgian blue cattle on the left, the Wagyu on the right, your optimum's going to be in between those extremes. Why I use extremes is because in all our herds, we have a cow that is the most like a Belgian blue. She's not close, but she's more Belgian blue than the other cows in your herd. And within that herd, you've got a cow that's more like a Wagyu than the other cows in your herd. And there's a herd in Kenya that I love going to, and I've done some work with them. And they run 6,000 boron cows on a 200,000 acre property they're commingling with. Here, it's a big thing if you commingle Angus and Hereford. There, they're commingling boron with lions and leopards and buffalo and crocodiles and all this. And it's a seed stock operation. These guys sell bulls. And it's just, I took Dr. Mark Allen from Iowa with me to go and see this herd. And he was actually on the panel that developed the 50K snip for Angus. So, I mean, this guy's not a bush cat like me. He's an indoor cat. Like, he's actually got proper PhD. Mine is just poor, hungry, and desperate. His is like real PhD. But he's also a cowman, so he understands what a cow should look like. And there were 120 boron bulls, mature bulls, in one pasture. It's not really pastures. They don't have fences. It's all their herdsmen live with the cattle and they move them around. And he couldn't believe the uniformity, the feet, the muscle, the testicles, just the mass of these bulls. And we're looking at these, and then the manager flew in his Piper Cub, and he had flip-flops on and like shorts, like what we would call rugby shorts. I don't know what you call them here, sports shorts, and a button-up shirt with one too many buttons undone and a floppy army hat on. And he came, and we were watching the cattle go through the dip, and these bulls going through the dip. And Dr. Mark Allen said to him, "So, what genetic evaluations and what selection tools are you using to get these cattle like this?" And he said, "Whenever we work them, we get rid of the ones that don't look like the others." Okay, so it's just eliminating outliers, and that got them this core herd. And Mark said to me, "I think we've over-complicated this whole system." I said, "What do you think?" Our job as leaders and breeders is to take a complex situation, simplify it, and then make it compelling. Unfortunately, what a lot of our industry does is they take a complex situation, they complicate it, and then they make it confusing. We have to keep ourselves doing the former. Milk, again, on the left, a Belgian blue cow is dry. I think will always be dry. She just, there's a classic example of a hormonal imbalance. Extremely heavy-fronted and masculine. She wedges the wrong way. She wedges like a bull should wedge. No softness. Like you'd have to feed fertility into her because you couldn't breed it into her. And the Holstein cow on the right, beautiful dairy cow, but under a beef system like you guys run, that cow is not going to milk very much at all because she's not going to reach her energy requirements, and she's not going to reproduce because she's not going to reach her energy requirements. So milk is optimums between those two, okay? And I think it's very, very important that we don't breed too much milk into our herds, because we can knock our reproduction on that. And in areas where there's a lot of disease, cattle that don't meet their energy requirements, they get hit by disease first. Logical fallacy number 6, relative privation. So this is when you use the very best example of your management system or your herd against the worst example of another herd or breed or management example. This happens all the time. I see this at every talk I go to. They never use the best against the best, always the best against the worst. That's just a tripwire for a good conversation. So there's a question that I get asked often when I travel around the world, because there's so many different views on this, is what size a cow should be. So when you look at your bulls over the past few weeks in the system, there's a lot of uniformity in the body type and the maturity pattern and the size of those bulls. And I think it's because you guys, I'm preaching to the choir now, so I'm not going to teach you anything. You're going to test me to see if I've been listening. And I think there are certain steps you can take which will assure you that your cows are the right size and the right shape. And these would be, firstly, responsible nutrition and management. And I know that sounds very vague, and kids told me it sounds vague, but I'm just putting guardrails up. Okay, if you want to know the exact details and the exact number, ask Kit. He's the white line down the middle of the road. I'm the guardrails keeping you on the road. We all want to end up in the same place. So just don't spoil them and don't starve them. Okay, look, it's an asset, so you're going to look after it and management right, but you're not going to kill it with kindness. Remember Freddie Mercury from Queen? Yeah, he said too much love will kill you. It will. Like if you give those cows too much love, you'll kill them. The second thing is to calve by 26 months. So if you're in a system that's calving at 2 and you're on 45-day breeding cycle, those females must calve by 26 months. And they've got to, the third thing is they must conceive within that 45-day breeding period. The fourth is they do that annually and on time every year. Okay. Then I think it's important to establish a minimum weight at weaning time. So I've used 7 months here because it's industry standard. But if we let the dinks stay in the system, everyone's got a calf that is too small for their objectives. Okay? If you keep letting it go all the way down, we get cows that are too small. We run into sheep and goat territory. And I don't know about here, because your sheep are quite big here, but the normal sheep, like the actual sheep around the world, those things are phenomenal. They'll lamb 3 times in 2 years and they raise twins, no problem. So you don't want to get into that territory, okay? The sixth thing is that calf needs to be, let's say, at least 45% of the mother's weight at weaning age, so at 7 months, that industry standard. That stops the cows from getting too big, because an 1,800-pound cow is not going to give you a calf that's 45%. Neither is a 1,600-pound cow, and a 1,400-pound cow is really going to struggle to do that, okay? You also don't want to go too high in terms of that cow-calf efficiency, because then again your cow's putting too much energy into her calf, and her fertility and her disease fighting ability doesn't get the calories that it needs. Do all 6 of those things, and the 7th point is within no time, 4 to 5 years, or no time is the same thing in the cattle industry, your cows are all the same body type, maturity pattern, and size, and that's the right type, whatever that is. So the evidence that something like this is working is how uniform your guys' cattle are. Line breeding, this is a breeding tool that I think is essential if used correctly. It's a power tool though. You know, Dr. Temple Grandin used the analogy when genomics came out, and she said, look, this is an electric saw. You can cut your hand off with it, whereas with a handheld saw, you know, manual saw, you'd never cut your hand off. But as soon as you break skin, you'll stop. Line breeding can be a bit of a power tool if you start with the wrong animals. So why, again, academia is right in that they try and get people not to line breed. They put inbreeding coefficients up, and some associations say 7%, others say 12%. The reason they're right is because in the past, a lot of breeders have used animals that are maximum for certain secondary turnover traits instead of using animals that have got those fundamental aforementioned profit traits in them. So if you line breed to an animal that's maximum muscle or maximum milk or maximum growth, the first thing to go is fertility and longevity, just like that when you're line breeding. So then they're going to say, oh, there's depreciation of fertility. Of course there is, because you compounded those genes. So of course that's going to happen. But if you select the right type of proven female to be the anchor of a line breeding program, and let's say she's a teenager now and you use her as the anchor of that line breeding program, you're compounding good genetics, you're compounding hormonal balance, you're compounding good structure, you're compounding good udder, you're compounding fleshing ability and low maintenance. So eventually she becomes the great-grandmother 4 times in the pedigree, all 4 times is her. The product you're putting out there is incredibly uniform. So I encourage line breeding if you've got a license and if you're not drinking red beer, okay? the Europeans hate this part of my talk. Like you can see, they visibly, they don't really look angry, they just look disinterested at that point. And I said to them, you know, the reason why you guys don't like line breeding or you're so afraid of it is because of your royal families. And if they, it's true, but if they had, it's not line breeding's fault. They started with the wrong people. If they started with the right people, it might have turned out a little bit differently. So we mentioned fat or easy fleshing ability or inherent body condition a lot, and it's because it's so important. Every stage of an animal's production cycle, and even for terminal animals, fat is so important. You breed them, you need fat to breed them, you need fat to outwinter them, you need fat to get them bred again, you need fat on the steers to get them finished and grading. So it's incredibly, incredibly important. What these, well, you can get fat in several ways. The one way you get it is genetically, so they inherit that body condition, or you can get it through a feed bag and keep the nutrition companies propped up. You can certainly get it in that way. It's a lot cheaper to do it genetically. These easy fleshing, early maturing cattle have got traits to them that correlate in such a positive way. The first thing is these cattle reach estrus at a younger age. The bulls are fertile at a younger age, so they stop shooting blanks much, much younger, okay? These cattle are more fertile. They're non-selective grazers, so they put their heads down and they graze. They've got appetite. They're high in leptin. They're better temperamented cattle. The early maturing, easier fleshing cattle have got better temperaments, and they're better eating experience because there's more flavor in the product. So now there are reasons why a leaner, later maturing animal is more favorable, but that's more favorable to processors and packers and feeders. We'll get back to why you mustn't worry too much about that yourselves, in my opinion. Logical fallacy number 7, an appeal to tradition. Who is the guy from South Dakota? I worked up in Gray City, North Dakota for a year, no, for 2 winters, not a consecutive year. And whereabouts in South Dakota are you from?
Northeast.
Northeast, okay. How far are you from Huron, South Dakota?
About 3 hours.
Okay. Chip and a putt. So I went to a cow sale in Huron, South Dakota, and there's a little motel, and it was a Sunday morning, and I needed to go to the airport to fly to Denver and down to Colorado Springs. But there was, I stood out there and the taxis just wouldn't come. There were no taxis coming. I thought, what's going on here, you know? So then a school bus came past, and I stopped the school. No, I didn't stop the school bus. He stopped when he saw me there. And he said, what's going on? So I said, I need to get to the airport, but I'm waiting for a taxi. He said, no, there are no taxis here. So I said, okay, well, that's not good. So he said, hop in. So I jumped in the school bus, and he first had to go feed his horse, and then took me to the airport in Huron, South Dakota. Why a guy in a school bus was feeding a horse, I don't know. But it was me and the flight attendant, and the pilot went through security off to Denver. What I'm saying, my point I'm trying to make with appeal to tradition, is you know that in North and South Dakota, all the big progressive seed stock guys they say they start calving in February, but I've been there in those barns at 2 in the morning. Those calves start hitting there 20th of January. Okay? All of them. Okay? The progressive guys, the guys who know what's going on, they're all calving at that time. Okay? But that's just an appeal to tradition. Because they've been doing that forever and they're all doing it, doesn't make it right. I mean, it makes it still ridiculous. So I think what we need to do is, because status quo is put in place and because traditions are created, that's got nothing to do with whether that idea is a good idea or not. Does it make sense? Okay. This is a typical cow-calf operation in Texas, up in those plains there in northwest Texas. And carrying capacity there is about 20 cows to an oil well is about what they run. And they're so proud, those Texans. I mean, we are, Texans, we're proud. I'm Texan now. Can you tell my West Texas accent? We're proud people. And the one thing they're very proud about is socialism. No, that doesn't work in Texas. No, you don't subsidize things or socialize anything. The cattle industry is heavily subsidized in Texas by oil and gas, by the way. So there's an element of socialism. It doesn't come from the government. It comes from the oil industry. But because of that oil and gas, a lot of the cattlemen in that part of the country can run an unsustainable cow by subsidizing it with money from off the farm, okay? And then it creates a vicious cycle, because the feedlots are also telling those producers what type of animal to produce so that they can pay top dollar when they go. They say top dollar, but it's actually the same dollar when they go to the feedlot. So now they're wedged in that way. And then the packers are telling the feedlots that they have to put so much more. We're overfeeding cattle in this country like you can't believe. They're putting so much extra, like 30 days extra fat on those cattle. The feedlots are making a profit up until, on a normal 10-year cycle. We're not in a normal year now. They're making a profit till about 180 days, and then that last 30 days, they're giving all that money back again just to get that fat on for the packers. And then the packers convince the retailers that they don't need to make a profit on the beef. They can make a profit selling toilet paper and toothpaste, and the beef will get the customers through the door. Okay, so what's happened here is the cow-calf guys have become a 501c company. It's a charity to make money for feedlots and packers. And I don't think that's a good idea, guys. I think that charity needs to begin at home. I think we've got to take care of our families, our communities, because the feedlots and the packers aren't in your hometown. Some of you, maybe, if you're lucky, well, unlucky, I don't know. They might be, but most of our hometowns haven't got packers and feedlots in them, but they've all got cow-calf producers. So make sure that those cow-calf operations make money on your property for your town. And how do you do that? You do it by having adapted cows that are function efficient, that are fertile and live a long time. So there's 100% of profit margin available in that value chain, okay? Of that 100% of profit margin available, 1% of that goes to the retailers. Normal year, not this year, normal year. The cow-calf guys and the backgrounders, the stockers, yeah, they're playing there at 3% each. Then you've got the feedlots who are also not that profitable, also lay at 3 to 4%. And then you've got the packers, 87% of that 100% that's available. So next time you go and buy a dollar profit pool, just make sure that your 501c, what's it, 501c? What's a charity? Yeah, make sure that all your documentation's in order, because that's essentially what you're doing. So with I want to show you some examples, I want to show you some receipts as to why I'm trying to avoid extremes and go for Optimum. This lovely girl here, lot 124, that cow was the dam, or I hope she was the dam, I hope she's not alive anymore, but she was the dam of the #1 dollar maternal bull in the Angus breed in these great United States of America. Okay? The best maternal bull in the biggest Angus country in the world, that's the mother over there. #1 for dollar maternal. You guys don't keep udders like that on your properties, okay? Okay, so I'm just saying, like, maybe Optimum is better than Maximum, okay? Then I want to show you a biscuit here, wait. I'm going to zoom him in so you don't want to miss this guy. Okay, let's see. So this guy, he's more impressive than that cow, because he, in one of the biggest beef databases in the world, he's #1 for Dollar Ranch, He's number 1 for dollar complete, not dollar profit, and he's in the top 0.1% for dollar feeder, okay? I'm going to show you something there. Look, he's 5 stars. Look at all those stars, okay? You're starstruck when you see this bull. If this bull was a human, he'd win the 100-meter sprints at the Olympics. 2 weeks later, he'd win the sumo wrestling in Japan. And then another 2 weeks later, he'd win the World Chess Championship in Switzerland. Okay? It's not possible. Like, that's not real, and it's not realistic. And look at him. He's a gravel pig, swamp donkey. I mean, none of you would use a bull like this. So I think we need to just trust our guts and our experiences and what we know cattle to be. Any questions on, I've got semen on that bull if anyone's interested. No one interested? Jeez, I thought I sold him quite, he's got 5 stars. I think how we avoid some of that is by avoiding linear measurement. Human nature doesn't work well with linear measurement because that line just keeps going up. You know, it never stops. I like the idea of a circular evaluation for cattle where 12 o'clock is optimum. That's based on your own objectives and resources. And what that means is, for whatever trait it is, let's say it's milk, 12 o'clock is where you want to be. 5 to 12 is actually fine, because if the train's leaving at 12, you're still going to make the train. 5 past 12, you've missed the train, so you have to come back again the next day to get it. And I think that if we keep that in mind, we can find our optimum. This world is littered with genetic tools and breeding tools and assisted reproduction tools. And a lot of them have merit if used correctly. Okay, there's phenotype, there's EBVs, EPDs, genomics. We've got in-herd indexes. We've got pedigrees. We've got the raw data. We've got genomics. All of that. Then we've got the assisted reproduction tools. We've got AI, ET, IVF, gene editing, cloning, all of that. Now, and all of those tools are individually celebrated and worshipped, and there's a great hurrah about all of those different types of tools. And so what I'm trying to bring back is some nuance and some perspective on these things, because this sale block, I think, is remarkably well made. It's giving me some height so I can see you guys and look you in the eye. When you think I'm having a go at your highland, see, we can see that I actually like her. It's powerfully constructed. It's holding up a laptop and water and all this different stuff. It's a good looking sail block from my side anyway. It's well lit, well positioned. But what you'll notice is I didn't mention anything about the hammers and the screws and the nails and the saws or the carpentry that it took to actually make this sail block. I think what the industry has driven us to do is focus so much on individual tools and not on the product itself. And then when we get a bad product, we make excuses for it, saying, but you should have seen the hammer that knocked the nails in, how awesome that was. I think we've got to look at the product. If the product isn't there, it doesn't matter what tools you used. I mean, it's completely irrelevant what tools you use if the product's not there. And there's just so much racketeering and marketing in all these different tools that, I encourage you to analyze the product. And if the product works for you, there might be some things that going back to see what tools were used to create that product might be of interest and of help. But we've got the cart way before the horse in that scenario. So to recap, we need cattle that can eat, walk, reproduce. Okay, that Limousin bull on the right in England, he's not going to do any of that. Okay, his structure's gone. He's got no testicles. He's got no rumen function and no rib shape. Udder quality is so important. Like I said earlier, you've got to have udder quality for longevity, for management, for health. That Fleck-free Simmental cow on the right, you can see really good ligament suspension, really balanced quarters, good forudder attachment, nice teat size and placement, That's just a good functional udder. The cow on the right's collapsed her udder floor, no forudder attachment. So that'll be the last time she lactates. You can't keep a cow like that again. Good feet on that Red Angus bull, top left. Again, essential that we optimize bone and then get those joints clean and flexible, get some cushion in those joints, but maintain some heel depth, some symmetry in those toes, and an appropriately sized foot. You don't want a small little foot with a big body, but you also don't want clown feet. You don't want them to walk like clowns. That Brangus bull, just well suspended scrotum. The bull on the right was a good Hereford bull, but in the wrong environment. Okay, so you can see with that bull, his scrotal neck has become really long. It's because he wasn't able to thermoregulate in his testicles, so he had to drop his scrotum just to cool it down. He's standing in he's in a beautiful green field, but he's standing in the mud. Tropically unadapted cattle, or cattle that are tropically degenerated, are always dirty because they're trying to get into mud and into water just to cool down and get insects off them and all that. The adapted cattle are always clean. Different body types, maternal body types, terminal body types. That blonde Akiten is definitely more terminal. He hasn't got the fleshing ability or the rumen function or the internal dimension. You can see even in his muscle shape, he's a myostatin carrier, so he's got double muscling. Temperament is so important. It's not a convenience trait, especially now as farmers and ranchers start getting older. And if you want to bring young families in, they're not going to want to work with crazy cows. So we've got to work on our temperament and be ruthless on it. Adaptability fallacy, or the bandwagon fallacy. This is another one that we need to get around. Now, I've bred Angus cattle and I've bred Red Angus cattle, and I think the right type of Angus cattle are incredible in all temperate environments. The reason Angus cattle are good is not because they're the most popular, okay? Because something's popular doesn't make it good. So let's go back in time to 1999. Who of you have still got your Backstreet Boys albums? Right. No, not one honest person in your crowd here. No Backstreet Boys albums. Okay, well, I didn't have any either, and I'm proud of the fact that I didn't, because even though they were the #1 selling band in 1999 in the world, didn't mean their music was good. That we've got to get past that ad populum fallacy. Because things are numerous doesn't mean they're good. Hide color and its effects on infrared and ultraviolet rays. Once you get into high altitude and ultraviolet becomes really harsh, you want as much solid color on an animal and as much pigment as possible just to reflect those rays. And white can become a hazard. With too much white on an animal can become a hazard when it comes to absorbing those ultraviolet rays at this altitude. Hair coats in summer and winter. You know, you guys were -6 Celsius yesterday, so what's that in Fahrenheit? Like 20, 15, something like that in the morning. So you want cattle that have got some hair on them, and then in summer you want these cattle to shed off quickly. As those days start getting longer and the light starts hitting the pituitary gland, that's when the hair starts coming off. Those females that shed first, they are fertile females. They're the ones that are going to come into estrus first. The ones that hold their hair for a long time, you're going to struggle to get them bred. Circular reasoning. This is classic, and we need to avoid this. Like, an inbreeding coefficient higher than 12% is dangerous because the Journal of Animal Science tells me so. I mean, that's, you know, that you can keep going around in circles forever, but that, again, that fact isn't, if that fact was true, it's not because it's in the Journal of Animal Science. It needs to be true and stand on its own as an idea. Pigmentation, we've just been through that. Along with, like, that's a very well-pigmented Hereford bull. That's the one good thing about him. The Fleckvieh bull on the right, you see he's got white eyes, white testicles, his extremities are, but no pigment. So not only would he struggle with ultraviolet or infrared, he would also struggle if he ate a poisonous plant or toxic plant. That photosensitivity would be too much for him. He'd have to be shaded immediately, or you could lose a bull from that. The no true Scotsman fallacy, I think this is appropriate for this group. You know, we've got all these different types of management, and everyone's put their own name on it, whether it's regenerative or holistic with a W, or organic or natural or sustainable, or high intensity grazing, cell grazing, ultra high intensity grazing, mob grazing, the list goes on, okay? So the no true Scotsman fallacy is basically something like this, that cowboys drink black coffee, okay? And then I say, but I drink milk with my coffee. And then the guy says, well, a true cowboy only drinks black coffee, okay? You can do that till the cows come home, and then there are no Scotsmen left, because by the end of it, you've lost everyone around you that was similar to you. And I think that what we need to be careful of is that most of these systems are trying to go in the right direction and trying to write each other off because you're not doing it exactly like the other guy does. It can become a lonely place if we keep going with that no true Scotsman fallacy. Guys, and it all correlates, and it's all about balance. You know, this shorthorn bull, as you can see, from his head all the way back to his hip and rump and hindquarter, it all balances out and it fits together. And balance is an interesting term. It's one that gets bandied and thrown about willy-nilly. It's a term like sustainability or equity. No one really knows what it means, so I'll try and explain what balance means to me. So balance is physiological balance, where all the body parts fit together appropriately and in the right proportions. Then it's the balance of the endocrine system. So all the glands are functioning correctly, releasing hormones at the right level, and then those hormones express themselves in the animal's phenotype. It's a balance between muscle, the product we produce, and fat, the energy it takes to produce that product. So in bulls, testosterone makes muscle, so you need well-muscled bulls with some muscle shape and tone to them, but they need to have some fleshing ability to go with that. And then with females, estrogen makes fat, so we need females that are easy fleshing and full-bodied, on their more refined skeletal structure. They need that extra fleshing and fat to go with it for them to be functional and productive. And then we need hormonal balance. Again, bulls that are rugged with grunt and punch, some thump to them. And then we need females that are ladylike and refined, silky in their hair coats, with faces like princesses and butts like cooks. That's what a good cow looks like. So that's hormonal balance. And all that balance produces an optimum product, not a maximum product. These are my contact details, and I'd love to chat to you guys anytime through the year on any of these, should you want to talk about nice things. If you're going to criticize, or if you're concerned, or if you've got questions that I can't answer, Kit likes handling those tough calls, so you can contact him with that. Guys, and if there are any questions, I'd love to have a shot at it, and the answer might be out with you guys. I might not know the answer, so if one of you knows the answer to the question, please help answer it. Thank you so much for sitting through that. Really, really good to be with you, and looking forward to chatting to you tomorrow before the sale. Thank you.
I can't believe you're going to let him off that easy. No questions? Steve?
You're a show judge, and it almost feels like the show world is going the complete opposite direction the commercial guys should be going. How do you judge animals? I mean, are you judging based off what you just told us, kind of Kit's philosophy too? Or how do you judge animals when you've done so many different breeds? And
So the question was, I'm a show judge, and the show world, can I paraphrase, has divorced itself from reality in most places, and really gone on its own tangent. So, like, how do I figure that out in my head? Yeah, that's a good question. So, if I'm judging a cattle show, everything I've been speaking about now is what I use in terms of how I sort those cattle, and I try and use the same terminology and examples to a crowd that is never going to hear it from anyone else, because I wasn't classically trained. Like I said, I'm a commercial bull. I'm not a registered bull. I'm a bush cat. So I wasn't trained through the K-State judges. I've judged with those guys. They're lovely guys, but we have different philosophies. So I want to, in a small way, become a therapist and bring those two divorced parties closer together again. Because I do believe that every industry needs a show, okay? So whether you're a vacuum cleaner or a speedboat, there needs to be somewhere where people can go and look at what the product looks like. Unfortunately, like you said, not everywhere. There's still places in the world that I go to that the commercial cattle and the show cattle just arrived that day from the farms. Like, they haven't been fed differently, they haven't been touched. It's an exhibition and a ranking, and then they sell them the next day, you know. So I'd say the US is probably on the negative extreme of that. Like, this is an exceptional country. It's exceptionally good and exceptionally bad. Like, the best food in the world is here, but the worst food is also just down the road here, okay? Like, you pop in a Taco Bell or something like that. Like, the Ethiopians are starving, but they won't eat Taco Bell, I'm telling you, you know. Culture, music, the best and the worst is all here. The wonderful thing is we've got a choice. We can choose the best in all those different things, and so I'm trying to put that message through in all these show rings, and I get black eyes and blood noses, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've got a letter that I'll frame when I've got time, calling me the worst ever judge to judge the Houston Livestock Show, and all the reasons why. I'll frame that one day. He said I like common looking cattle. Well, I'll wear that as a badge of honor. The same show, this lady said that I just like bush cows. So, yeah, I'm guilty, you know. So, yeah, it's a good point. You often, I won't get hired back to a lot of those places, but there's enough going around. I mean, it's fine. But they do ask you back, because it's an opinion that a lot of them have never heard before. The Brahmin guys asked me this year, they said, before you judge, please don't use the term hormonal balance, because no one knows what you mean by that. So I said, well, if they don't know what we mean by that, they probably shouldn't be in the cattle business, because it's such a key. And they said, well, how can you see that? And I used the analogy of, you know, you're sitting in the hotel lobby or the bar, and you're 17 years old, and 3 girls come bouncing in with a swing in their gait and a kick in their step. Within 1 second, that 17-year-old can turn his back on those girls and explain all 3 of those girls in perfect detail. And he knows they're not boys. They've got hormonal balance, you know. So it's the same thing with cattle, and it's just trying to bring practical, real-world profitability back into. Now, I'm not saying it's going to change the show ring, but the ne'er-do-wells are going to do well on the day that I judge.
Obviously, I've raised my hand, and everybody knows I'm the weird Highland guy in the room. But I've got a good friend up in northern Colorado that runs a commercial herd where his mama cows are half Highland and half Simmental, and then he covers them with an English bull. And I'm trying to emulate what he's doing, and from what I've seen from from Kit's stock, and from his seminars that I've watched, he's going the right direction, because in my neck of the woods, most of the Angus look like they're walking around on stilts. And I don't like paying extra to put frame on the animals. And one of the things that I haven't heard you talk about is, or maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, is frame size wasting money on the cow-calf operator.
So the question involves maybe a lack of attention to actually addressing frame size. And he's got a friend up in northern Colorado who crosses Simmental and Island. Are those like purebred Simmentals or the full bloods?
They're commercial Simmental.
But like, are they black or red, or like the red and white ones?
He's like me, he don't like black ones.
Okay. So, but not the traditional Simmental, like a American purebred Simmental. Okay. And then he's putting, I'd love to let this slide, but when you say English, what do you mean?
He bounces back and forth between Shorthorn, Angus, and Whiteface.
Okay. I had to do this in Houston too with the organizers there. Like, calling an Angus English would make every Scotsman turn in their grave. But yeah, so on that, none of these philosophies work on big cattle. Like anything that's too extreme from a frame standpoint, none of this actually applies anymore. So I maybe should have come out, you're right, from the bat and said, look, we've got to moderate frame, we've got to be more industry relevant and appropriate from a functionality and a profitability standpoint by breeding the right frame cattle, because a large framed animal that's leaner and later maturing, none of that's going to fit in any of these philosophies. So yeah, I mean, I probably took that for granted. So the next time I speak, I'm going to lead with that.
Speaking on frame size, when a group of steers runs in, because I mean we all sell steers and we try to keep our best heifers, when a group of steers comes in that's got huge frame, whole bunch of leg, they bring a lot of money, because they, especially if they're green obviously, because they think they can put a whole bunch of pounds on them. And if I start using these bulls and they're shorter and a little bit wider, they think they're fuller, they're not going to be able to put as much weight as fast on them because they're already kind of full. So what's the argument to that?
Yeah, Kit's going to give it to you now, and I think he'll nail it. Otherwise, I'll just add the finishing touches.
He'll correct me. You know, we are so enamored with having the biggest calves in the county or topping the market, but you can top the market at every year and still go broke. That's the problem now. The feedlot wants those big calves because the packer wants those big calves. The packer makes money off of it. You're losing money at home because, you know, you've got tall, lean cows that can't get bred and heifers. So, you know, we need to regroup and say, okay, what's our goal? Is it to have the biggest calves in the county, top the market? You know, I shared in my last newsletter. Do you get our newsletter about the big calf syndrome? You know, a truckload, 50,000 pounds of 450-pound calves is worth $58,000 more than a truckload of 650-pound calves. I mean, you don't have to top the market to make more money. It's that's the hardest paradigm to break. But you're thinking for the packer, not you. And eventually, you know, we talk about pounds per acre instead of pounds per animal. You know, with the smaller frame, we have smaller cows, weanings, probably smaller calves, but more total pounds that are worth more per pound. How'd I do?
No, you absolutely nailed it. So I think what I would say to that too is that you're going to get, potentially you're going to get paid more on that day when you sell those steers, but you're going to pay more every other day of the year while you're running those cows. And it's not just in maintenance costs, it's in lack of fertility, It's in fighting disease, it's in heat stress. So it's, yeah, I mean, you could make this argument with any industry, like why don't we have a bigger factory? But if you're putting out the same product, the efficient way to do it was to keep that same product with a smaller factory. So I think just bear in mind the 364 days of the year that you're paying more to warrant to be paid, to get paid more on the one day, if that makes sense.
Can I add something to that too?
Yeah.
One thing that I think is amazing is we think since we're using PCC bulls, we're just going to have all these small, short frame. It's amazing how well PCC bull does, how well their calves turn out, crossed with like your herd you have now, your commercial herd. You'll be amazed how good they are. And really, we think, oh, they're too small. Come look at some of the PCC producers' calves, and they're not as small as you think they are. You know what I mean? They are smaller than what you're used to, but they're still pretty amazing calves.
Yeah, I think I've got a client in Australia that I told Kit about who's got a big Hereford herd, and he's been using PCC black bulls. And he said the nick has been incredible, like the way those bulls have nicked on his cows. And he actually said they're weaning heavier than the pure Hereford cows. So the other thing that's fascinating, and if you think about this with your cows at home, your big cows don't wean as high a percentage of their body weight as your small cows. But not only that, your small cows actually wean heavier calves than your big cows. Because a big cow can't wean a heavy calf because her energy requirements are too high. So her energy is not going into feeding that calf, it's going into feeding herself. Now, unless you're pouring feed at her, I mean, then you can do anything. Feed's amazing. You pour corn at a cow, you can make anything happen out of her. But then you need to use 2 columns in your balance sheet, not just the income column, the cost column as well. And I think that's where you land back at optimum again. Because I like the term, you know, these cattle are big lying down. They're not big when they get up. They haven't got long legs. They're big lying down. And that's what you want a cow to be. They must be full. They're ruminants. You know, they're massive, but they're not tall.
I'll remind you of Dr. Lallman from Oklahoma State. I shared a video of him, and I can't remember the exact numbers or dates, but basically we have been selecting for bigger calves, bigger weaning weights for 50 years. I mean, we've been programmed and we've got the tools to do it. And it's kind of like something that PJ shared, you know, we're losing money, but somebody else is making money as we're doing this. But Dr. Lallman said that as of 2001 or 2002, weaning weights have not changed. You know, for up until that time, we were seeing some increase in weaning weights. We see more increase in cow weights. So from that point on, cow weights keep going up, weaning weights are staying the same. You know, it's a different world, and that's the environment's a limiting factor. You know, most of the environments represented here cannot support high growth genetics like the industry has. Steve.
Are you going to be here tomorrow? Some of the things you're pointing out on physical traits, could we like have you show us a little bit on some of these bulls?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll be here I've got a call like at 10 or something, but outside of that call, I'll be here.
You promise?
Yeah, watch and see.
Some of his calls take a long time. But once he gets started going through the animals, and I've tagged along with him and I've asked him, you know, what do you think of this, that, and you know, I would hate to go through a herd of 100 cows with PJ because it'd take all day and maybe part of the next day. He's enamored with that. So, you know, just hang around. Ryan's son, Skyler, followed him around in Texas. And did you learn anything, Skyler?
Yes, sir.
You know, you don't have to be there asking questions, but he'll show you what he thinks.
Yes, sir.
some of the terrain that I've got at my ranch is pretty steep, rocky country. Is there an angle that I should be looking for in the hip or the shoulder that would make them more beneficial for that steep country?
The only thing I would insist on is to get some strength in your pastons so your dew claws are not too close to the ground. Because if your dew claws are too close to the ground, you're going to pick up cuts and injuries because you've got stones there, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you want cushion in your pastons, but deep heels. So I would definitely look at that. I had a guy from, I didn't tell you, I had a guy from Ecuador wanting Angus semen this week, and I actually sent him that picture you sent me of that black bull. He said, no, he wants one with long legs because it's got to climb hills. So I said, have you ever seen a bush pig run up a hill? I mean, those things are like 4x4s. So it's amazing what gets into people's heads. The West Texas guys that I work with, it took me, honestly, 10 years to get into their heads that they had to moderate their frame, but they said, no, this is big country here, big country, you know, and they need long legs to be able to cover this big country. Have you seen a goat cover country? I mean, you'll never stop a goat. They go through 3 or 4 properties a day, those things. And from a physiology standpoint, look at humans. The sprinters are 6'4" and massive, okay, like muscular. The marathon runners are like 5'7" and short-legged, you know. So I think this is just stuff that guys with oil in West Texas tell themselves, you know. I can't see the actual, how valid it is.
I think the short answer to that is good feet.
Yeah.
And that's something we've been doing, I don't know how many years. We've been using the Angus foot chart to evaluate the feet on all the bulls we sell. And that's always available. I don't put it in the catalog, but I've got links that I can send to anybody that asks for it. So those of you who come and watch us work bulls, you know we have it, so you ask for it. But I'm just, a lot of the stuff we do is to make us better. You know, we need to eliminate the bulls with preputial prolapse problems. We need to eliminate the bulls with foot problems. You know, that's, if I put everything in that catalog that we do, it just gets more confusing. You just have to trust that we're doing the right things as much as we can.
How do you get a bull that you raise at higher elevations? How do you get him to be up there in those elevations? Like the pap did? So if you're going to raise your bulls at 8,000 feet with the cows, you just get a lower pap score, I know that. But how do you incorporate her in your breeding to get that bull to that level?
You raise, some of us raise bulls at a high elevation.
Yeah. So that's where you get them in there?
That's what we test.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
So he's saying if he wants to select cattle at high altitude, is there something else he needs to look at other than pap scores?
Well, and I've talked to John about this, but the BCHF, I mean, we sorted for that too, didn't we? Low risk for bovine congestive heart failure. I may be in the minority, but I think eventually a DNA test for low risk heart failure is going to be better than pap testing. You know, you can pap test the same cow every day of the week with different vets every day, and it's going to be a different score. DNA is going to be what it is at birth and death, the same all the way through. So, but you're more asking like a phenotype to look for, and you know, I don't know. You know,
I've got something for that.
I will say that when we had a bull sale in Riverton, Wyoming, we developed them, raised them and developed them in Pinedale, Wyoming, which is, I don't know how high that is. Do you?
6,500.
Pinedale? Yeah. I thought it was higher than that. Okay. No, it's higher than that. Pinedale is higher.
68 maybe? I thought it was closer to 8.
I think it is. Anyway, we took cows from eastern Colorado, western Kansas up there to start those herds. And when Dr. Holt Pap tested them, he says, you guys, you know, these cows that come from a low elevation environment have got better tests than the guys that have been here for several generations. And I think it's just like everything else. You know, when you just select for growth and growth and growth, you lose your tenderness, you lose your heart deal, you lose a lot of things that we shouldn't have lost. Go ahead.
Sorry, I interjected prematurely there. I apologize. So what we found from a cattle standpoint is it's pretty much what Kit's saying. There are two things that, like pap scoring wasn't a thing until cattle got too big. Okay, it wasn't an issue because it's an oxygen issue. And the other thing that makes cattle really struggle at high altitude is too much marbling, because that oxygen is being stored in that intramuscular fat. So it comes back to optimize again. You take, like in the Andes, Machu Picchu, the indigenous Peruvians are 5 foot if they're lucky, okay, because they've lived up in the Andes their whole lives, Machu Picchu. If you go to Nepal, like where Mount Everest is in the Himalayas, the Nepalese are very short people, okay, because it's oxygen. So in order to get that oxygen to flow into like the entire body and for that oxygen to be utilized at optimum levels, the two traits that you definitely can't go extreme on is frame, and the other one is too much marbling. Because the optimum marbling cattle don't struggle with it. It's the ones where they push them too high or their frames are too big. Does that make sense?
I didn't know that. I just learned something.
Just a comment on the calves and the calf size. We had top cut of the steers weighed 773, and the next cut was 680. And on a per head basis, the heavier ones were only worth $24 more. So that was just something that really surprised me, because I would have not expected that, you know.
Now, you don't get paid, we don't get paid for big calves. But if we can run 20, 30, 50% more cows, that's where we're going to get paid.
So is this phenomenon of bigger frames and less profitable cattle, is that a worldwide phenomenon, or is it mostly the U.S.?
So the question is if the phenomenon for large frame cattle is worldwide or whether it's a US trade. Look, the Europeans have taken it to another level. They are at about the frame that the US was at in the 80s, but with muscle on it. I mean, it's extreme. They're calving at 3 years old with those. I mean, they're carving 1,800 pound heifers at 3 years old. Okay. I'd say North America, yes, Australia's definitely chased the frame because they've got the Japanese and South Korean markets, and any system that has a lot of feeding in confinement has chased that frame. The systems that are finishing off forage or like a short finish in confinement, they're pretty moderate. Like all of Africa is pretty moderate. Most of South America is moderate. And then Asia, where there are a lot of cattle in Asia, they're very moderate frame cattle. Yeah. But yeah, Europe, North America, and Australia would be. Whereas then New Zealand, which is all forage based, those are very moderate frame cattle. Massive, but moderate. Yeah. So it all depends on the feeding system and what market the packers are sending those animals to. And look, these packers, they sly old foxes there, because when I got here 13 years ago, they were telling everyone the ribeyes were too big. And then suddenly now they're wanting to feed 1,600, they feed steers to 1,600 pounds. So if you follow them blindly, they'll turn quickly on you in terms of what they're actually wanting. Because you're not going to get small ribeyes from a 1,600 pound steer.
With your genetics, the way you've lined it out, what is your optimum weight to slaughter?
How big were those heifers, Nathan? 1,500 pounds. That's not optimum. I would say, with age, if you put a calf in the feedlot right off his mama, he's not going to be very big when he gets fat. With a little bit of age, they're going to weigh 1250 to 14. We were grass finishing those down there in the Texas Panhandle on cover crops, and those steers were weighing 1260 or 70, I think, when we slaughtered them off of grass.
What was your carcass weight?
I don't remember that now. But again, I think Steve mentioned and others, our cattle aren't that small. They just got more cow and less leg. I would match, my 3-frame cows are going to outweigh most people's 5-frame cows.
Isn't there something that, like, steers should finish within 100 pounds of their mama's weight?
Yeah, and that was the point I was going to make, Preston, so you one-upped me there.
Well, we got the same weight, mate.
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. Well, fools seldom differ is what they say. But, guys, the reason why, like, an average cow in the US, I know there's no such thing as average because I read your newsletters, but in the US, it's quite common that cows are 1,400 pounds, okay? But they're killing steers at 1,600 pounds. So how do they do that? They overfeed them. It's horribly overfed, this system, when you see how much grease there is on those carcasses. So, and also, are you finishing your own steers?
I want to work towards that, yes.
Yeah. It's remarkable. The other thing that to bear in mind with these guys is that, like, whether it's certified Angus beef, which we'll get onto on another day, or it's the packers, these guys keep talking about ribeyes and New York strips. 12% of the beef we eat is in steak form. I mean, the most popular cut in the world is ground beef. I mean, so I'm almost inclined to say, if you breed for that cut, that ground beef cut, and you keep your cattle adapted, functional, fertile with longevity, you're feeding into the mainstream and with profitable cows.
His comment about average, I was in Australia once speaking to a group. We had a cover over us, but it was a pretty big group, and it wasn't in a building. But anyway, somebody else that spoke before me, I think they were going through a real bad drought at that point. And he wanted to talk about average, and he says the average person has one testicle and one boob, but you don't see that very often. So, average is, and that used to be a word you like to use, wasn't it?
Not anymore.
I watched enough of his stuff to try to help him change the word average to optimum, and he's done a very good job. So, one final question. Paul.
You talked about Australia, United States, and where else that's got the bigger, largest frame cattle. And New Zealand, for instance, doesn't. Does that have anything to do with subsidies? Because New Zealand got rid of subsidies in '81, totally changed their ag economy.
No, it's more to do with the New Zealand farmers are grass farmers, so they finish their cattle and their sheep and they milk off grass. They just don't present grain to their cattle ever. So that's driven that phenotype in that direction.
Give him a hand.
Thank you guys, that was fun. Thank you for the question.